Usually, when we talk about escaping the noise of modern life, our minds go straight to comfort.
Oh, absolutely. We think of pampering ourselves.
Right, like a spa day or a quiet cabin in the woods. Or maybe, paying $100 to float in one of those sensory deprivation tanks.
Those are everywhere now.
Yeah, you step in, close the lid, float in the warm salt water, and just let the pitch darkness wrap around you. It's really the ultimate pursuit of nothingness.
Which makes sense.
It does. We just want the world to go away so we can finally relax, unplug, and rest.
And that's a profound modern instinct, right?
Mm.
We view silence and isolation as a kind of therapy.
Yeah, a way to decompress.
Exactly, to decompress from this incredibly overstimulated world. But when we step into the world of early Christian monasticism, that whole framework just completely shatters.
It doesn't apply at all.
Not even a little. In the ancient texts, stepping into isolation isn't a retreat into rest. It is an aggressive advance into the most hostile territory imaginable.
It's a battlefield,
It is the absolute definition of a spiritual war zone.
which completely flips our modern understanding on its head. So today we are doing a deep dive into the life, the psychological struggles, and the ultimate spiritual transformation of St. Antony of the Desert.
The father of Christian monasticism.
Right, the guy who essentially started it all. And our guide for this journey is this foundational text from the 4th century, The Life of St. Antony, written by the great theologian St. Athanasius.
And it's crucial to point out that we are not looking at this text merely as some, dusty historical biography.
No, not at all.
Athanasius didn't write it to simply record dates and events. He wrote it as a highly practical, deeply contemplative manual for inner warfare.
A guidebook, basically.
Exactly. It's a guidebook for confronting the true self, completely stripped of all worldly illusions.
So for you listening to this, I want to invite you to actually step away from your modern distractions for the duration of this deep dive.
Just put it all down for a bit.
Yeah. Put aside the notifications, the underlying anxieties of your week, those emails that are just piling up in your mind, because we are walking out of the noise of the world and stepping into the stark, unforgiving landscape of the Egyptian desert.
And we have to remember the ancient worldview here. The desert was not a romantic place of meditation for them.
Right, it wasn't a retreat center.
No, it was viewed as the dwelling place of demons, the realm of absolute chaos. So to go out there was to deliberately pick a fight with the darkness itself.
And to ultimately encounter the divine in that terrifying stillness.
Yes. But to really understand the magnitude of what Antony did, we have to look at who he was before the desert.
Because he wasn't born a monk.
Far from it. He was born into extreme comfort. The text tells us he was around 18 or 20 years old when his parents died.
And they left him quite a bit, right?
A massive inheritance. We're talking about an estate of over 200 acres of highly fertile land in Middle Egypt.
Wait, 200 acres in the ancient world?
Yeah, it's immense. Plus, he had the responsibility of caring for his younger sister.
So in the context of the 3rd century, 200 acres of fertile Egyptian farmland makes him essentially a local lord.
Basically, yes. He's the CEO of a massive agricultural enterprise.
He has deep societal roots, heavy social obligations, and just absolute financial security.
Everything a young man of his era could possibly want.
Right. But then Athanasius tells us that about 6 months after his parents' death, Antony is walking into church.
Just a normal day.
Yeah, and he hears the gospel reading. It's the story of the rich young man where Christ says, "If thou wilt be perfect, go sell all that thou hast and give it to the poor and come follow me."
And the defining characteristic of Antony in this moment is the immediate nature of his obedience.
He doesn't hesitate.
Not at all.
Why?
He doesn't hear that gospel passage as a nice metaphor. He doesn't sit there and interpret it as, a general suggestion to be a bit more generous with his surplus income.
Like giving to a charity once a year.
Right. He takes it with devastating literalism. He walks right out of the church, gives away his entire 200-acre estate to the townspeople, sells all his other belongings, and just distributes the cash to the poor.
It's wild. He does keep a tiny fraction of the money at first, just to ensure his sister is provided for.
Right. He's not entirely reckless.
But then, shortly after that, he hears another reading about taking no thought for the morrow, and he's like, well, I have to give that away too.
He just empties his pockets completely.
He places his sister in the care of a community of pious women, which was an early form of a convent known as a Parthenon.
Yes, ensuring she's safe.
And then he simply walks away from his entire aristocratic life. He embraces extreme poverty and asceticism right on the outskirts of his village.
And the underlying spiritual logic here revolves around this profound concept of detachment.
Detachment. Let's unpack that.
Well, Athanasius is not arguing that fertile land or wealth or even caring for a family are inherently evil things.
Right. They're good things normally.
Exactly. The issue is that these worldly possessions act as anchors.
Hmm.
Or, to use the martial language that permeates the text, they are leverage for the enemy.
Ah, leverage, like something you can be blackmailed with.
Yes. If Antony is preparing to enter a state of total spiritual warfare, he must strip away absolutely anything the devil could use to pull them back or manipulate him.
Because, I mean, if you have land, you have to worry about the harvest.
You're tied to the weather,
Yeah.
the workers.
Yeah. And if you have money, you live in fear of thieves or economic collapse. You're constantly defending your perimeter.
Precisely. So detachment is the process of disarming the enemy by voluntarily removing your own vulnerabilities.
You can't be threatened with losing something you've already given away.
Exactly. You cannot be threatened with the loss of your reputation if you've already abandoned it. You cannot be threatened with poverty if you have deliberately chosen it.
That makes so much sense.
So Antony's physical stripping away of his wealth was the necessary outward manifestation of an inner emptying. He had to become entirely empty of the world so he could be filled with God.
I find myself trying to translate a 200-acre Egyptian farm into our modern context.
It's tricky, right?
Very few of us have literal estates to abandon, but for you listening, our modern estates are arguably even heavier.
Without a doubt.
They are our carefully planned career trajectories, our meticulously curated digital identities.
Our 401ks.
Yeah, the retirement accounts, and just this relentless accumulation of information and comfort. We are constantly acquiring things, even intangible things like opinions and status, just to feel secure.
We want a safety net for our egos.
Right. So what does it actually mean to sell all you have in an age driven by the terrifying fear of missing out?
I think for the modern person, radical detachment might look a lot less like signing over a deed to a farm and more like relinquishing our addiction to approval.
Oh, that's tough.
It is. It's giving up our need to control outcomes or our dependence on constant digital stimulation. We build these massive fortresses of distraction around ourselves so we don't have to face the emptiness inside.
And Antony just dismantled his fortress voluntarily.
He took it down brick by brick.
I do have to push back on this on behalf of the modern ear, though.
Go for it.
Abandoning a massive estate and leaving a younger sister, even if she is in the care of others, it feels incredibly irresponsible to us today.
It sounds like running away.
Yeah. We are conditioned to view citizenship, economic contribution, and direct family provision as the highest possible moral goods. So is this actual spiritual heroism, or is there an element of extreme escapism here?
That's the obvious critique.
I mean, could someone argue he was just a young guy who couldn't handle the crushing pressure of running the family empire?
That is a completely natural, modern reaction. But we have to read it through the lens of early Christian asceticism.
Okay, how did they view it?
Well, the ascetic movement was deeply suspicious of the idea that conforming to societal expectations of wealth and status was the ultimate good.
They didn't buy into the Roman dream, so to speak.
Exactly. And furthermore, notice that he didn't actually abandon his duty to his sister.
Right, the Parthenon.
Yes, he carefully arranged for her to be raised, educated, and protected by a respected community of faithful women. He ensured her spiritual and physical safety before he left.
So she closed out his accounts properly.
He did. As for the charge of escapism, Athanasius structures the entire narrative to argue the exact opposite.
How so?
Athanasius wants us to see that hiding in worldly comfort, distracting yourself with wealth, prestige, and endless entertainment, that is true escapism.
Oh, wow. So we're the ones
Yeah,
escaping.
exactly. You are escaping the terrifying reality of your own soul. You are avoiding the ultimate questions of existence. The desert is not where you go to hide from the world.
It's where you're going to fight.
It is where you go to fight the dark forces that secretly govern the world.
That reframing makes total sense. So once the physical wealth is gone, the battlefield shifts inward.
Yes, the external anchors are cut.
Antony moves to the edge of his village, and he's engaging in grueling manual labor and constant prayer. He's removed the physical leverage, so the enemy immediately adapts and attacks his mind.
The devil is portrayed in this text as a highly intelligent strategist.
He doesn't just do the same trick over and over.
No, he adapts. When he sees that Antony is immune to the physical allure of the money itself, He targets the memory and the intellect.
The psychological warfare begins.
Exactly. The initial attacks are purely psychological. It starts with nostalgia for his lost wealth and acute anxiety about his sister.
So he hits him where he's most vulnerable.
Right. The enemy whispers things like, look at the good you could have done with that estate.
Oh, that's clever. Posing is a good thing.
Yes, you could have funded hospitals. Look at the noble status you threw away for this miserable dirt.
It is the trap of the alternative timeline. The demon of what if.
And we all struggle with that.
We really do. But Antony refuses to entertain those thoughts. He just won't engage. So the devil realizes the memory tactic isn't working, and he escalates from the memory to the flesh.
The gloves come off.
The text describes a barrage of sensual attacks. The enemy suggests filthy thoughts, trying to overwhelm him with lust, and even manifests in the dead of night as a highly seductive woman.
Attempting to break his resolve through sheer physical desire.
Right. And we must pay close attention to how Antony counters this assault.
Because he doesn't just white-knuckle it.
Exactly. He does not simply clench his fists and try to repress the thoughts through willpower alone. He actively fights back with rigorous fasting, continuous prayer, and this deep intellectual reflection on his faith.
Athanasius specifically notes that Antony filled his thoughts with Christ and reflected on the nobility and spirituality of the human soul.
I love that part. He counters the degradation of lust by elevating his mind to the divine dignity of what a human being is actually created to be.
He remembers his own worth.
Yes, he remembers who he is.
And practically, he starves the physical passions through fasting, which weakens the flesh's grip on the mind.
It lowers the volume on the physical urges.
Exactly. And simultaneously, he feeds the intellect with divine contemplation. This twofold approach ultimately breaks the assault.
Which leads to one of the most striking and perhaps jarring images in the early chapters of the text.
The confrontation.
Right. The devil, realizing he is completely beaten in this arena, appears to Antony physically. He manifests in his heart as a cowering black boy.
It's a very specific image.
Yeah, and he basically admits defeat. He's whining, saying, I am the spirit of fornication and you have beaten me.
Now, we really need to carefully contextualize that specific imagery for a modern audience.
Definitely. It sounds strange to us today.
In the ancient world, and particularly in early Christian desert literature, blackness or darkness in this context has absolutely no relation to modern racial categories or human ethnicities.
It's not about race at all.
Not at all. It is a strict spiritual archetype. It represents the absence of divine light, the shadows, the underworld, and demonic obscurity.
It is the visual representation of a shadow figure, something completely devoid of the light of truth.
Exactly. But the theological genius of this moment really lies in the size and the posture of the demon.
He's a child.
He appears as a cowering, pathetic, weak child. Athanasius is offering a profound psychological insight into the true nature of sin and temptation here.
How so?
Well, when a temptation is whispering in your ear, whether it is lust, greed, or anger, it feels massive.
It feels overwhelming.
It feels overwhelmingly powerful, seductive, and invincible. It presents itself as a giant that you cannot possibly resist.
But once Antony drags it into the light of Christ through discipline and prayer, the illusion shatters.
Yes. Once the temptation is exposed, it loses all its seductive power. It is revealed for what it actually is: weak, childish, pathetic, and parasitic.
Because it has no real substance of its own.
Exactly. Evil, in the ascetic worldview, has no actual substance. It is merely a distortion of the good. When confronted with a purified soul, it shrinks.
I keep thinking about the enemy's tactics in this section like a highly sophisticated modern algorithm.
Now, that's a brilliant comparison.
Like the kind designed by social media companies to keep you scrolling infinitely. The algorithm's only goal is engagement, right?
Just keep you clicking.
Yeah. And it serves you your greatest weaknesses to see what gets a click. If nostalgia for your past doesn't make you engage, it quickly shifts and tries lust.
And if lust fails, it pivots again.
It tries outrage, despair, or anxiety. It is constantly probing your psyche for a vulnerability.
That analogy holds up incredibly well against the text. The demon is literally testing different inputs to find the vulnerability in Antony's system.
And Antony's response, the rigorous fasting, the silence, the prayer, that is the ultimate unfollowing.
He's logging off.
He is aggressively disconnecting from the feed. He is refusing to give the algorithm any data to work with. He won't click on the nostalgia. He won't dwell on the lust. He just keeps his eyes fixed forward.
But Antony also knows the algorithm will eventually just rewrite its code.
It always updates.
Right. After this first major victory, Antony realizes the devil isn't destroyed. He is merely regrouping. Athanasius writes that Antony knew the wiles of the evil one are manifold.
So he can't just relax.
No. So rather than resting on his laurels, Antony decides he must radically intensify his training. He realizes that staying near the village is just too comfortable.
He needs more resistance.
Exactly. He pushes further away from human society and deliberately moves into the realm of the dead.
He moves into the tombs.
Yes.
He asks a friend to lock him inside an empty tomb located far away from the village, arranging for bread to be brought only occasionally.
Total isolation.
And this is where the spiritual warfare transitions from those psychological skirmishes into brutal physical combat.
The text shifts tone completely here.
It really does. The text describes the demons as terrified of his spiritual advancement. They realize he is encroaching on their territory.
He's taking background.
So they physically attack him in the tomb, beating him so severely that he is left speechless and half dead on the floor.
The physical violence here represents the absolute desperation of the demonic forces.
When the mind games don't work.
Right. When psychological manipulation fails, chaos resorts to brute force. His friend comes to bring him bread, finds him unconscious, and carries him back to the village church.
Everyone assumes he is going to die. They are literally preparing for his funeral.
But then in the middle of the night, Antony regains consciousness.
And he does something unthinkable.
He turns to his friend, and despite being unable to even stand up, he demands to be carried back to the tomb.
He refuses to yield a single inch of the ground he has taken.
It's an unbelievable level of defiance.
That level of spiritual defiance is staggering.
It is the absolute refusal to retreat. He is carried back, locked in again, and he simply lies there on the floor, unable to move, basically taunting the darkness.
And the darkness answers.
Why does?
The demons return, but this time Athanasius says they mimic wild beasts.
A menagerie of terror.
The tomb is suddenly filled with the terrifying noises and shapes of lions, bears, leopards, bulls, wolves, and scorpions.
Just a wall of sensory overload.
They're all charging at him, roaring, striking, trying to tear him apart. But Antony, lying there broken, just mocks their weakness.
He laughs at them.
He tells them, if you had any real power, just one of you would be enough to kill me. But because the Lord has made you weak, you try to terrify me with numbers. You are reduced to mimicking animals.
This scene plunges us deep into the theology of suffering and perseverance.
It's tense.
While Antony is enduring this horrific sensory and physical onslaught, refusing to break, the text says a beam of light suddenly pierces the roof of the tomb.
The breakthrough.
Yes. The demonic beasts instantly vanish, the agonizing pain in his body completely disappears, and the tomb is filled with peace. Antony realizes that Christ is intimately present.
And Antony asks a question in that moment that I think resonates with anyone who has ever suffered deeply or felt abandoned by God.
It's such a human question.
He looks at the light and says, "Where were you? Why did you not appear at the beginning to stop my pains?"
And the response he receives is one of the most famous and vital lines in all of ascetic literature.
What does the voice say?
The voice of the Lord answers, "I was here, Antony, but I waited to see you in action. And now, because you held out and did not surrender, I will ever be your helper."
Wow.
This addresses a massive theological question about how God operates within our human struggles.
Yeah.
God permits the struggle. He allows the intense heat of the fire so that the soul can forge its own strength.
It is the mechanism of resistance training. Without the fierce resistance of the demons, Antony's spiritual muscles, his virtues, would never have been tested or developed to their full heroic potential.
Because if God immediately rescued us from every temptation or pain the exact second it arose, we would remain spiritual infants.
We'd never grow up.
We would never develop the capacity for deep, resilient love or unshakable faith.
This makes me wonder how we should view spiritual dryness or even deep psychological distress today.
It's completely different now.
Our modern instinct is heavily biased toward immediate relief. If we feel anxious, if we feel spiritually empty, or if we are sitting in grief, we want a pill, a distraction, a new routine, or a quick fix to make the discomfort stop immediately.
We can't stand the discomfort.
Right. But Antony's time in the tombs suggests that enduring the darkness with vigilance, actually sitting in the discomfort and refusing to flee, is the very mechanism of spiritual growth.
We live in a highly anesthetized culture. We pathologize almost all forms of suffering and try to eradicate them instantaneously.
Any pain is seen as a glitch.
Right. We flee from the slightest hint of boredom or emotional pain. Antony's life stands as a stark contradiction, suggesting that suffering, when born with faith and orientation toward God, is deeply transformative.
It's doing something to you.
You do not grow by escaping the tomb. You grow by surviving it and letting it strip away your illusions.
But let me interrupt this theological point with a very practical modern skepticism.
I figured this was coming.
It is very hard for a listener today to hear a story about demons taking the form of leopards and scorpions attacking a man in a pitch-black tomb and not immediately think of extreme psychological hallucinations.
It sounds like a psychotic break.
Exactly. The man is entirely isolated, severely sleep-deprived, traumatized from a physical beating, and barely eating. From a modern neurological standpoint, his brain is misfiring spectacularly.
The conditions are perfect for it.
So how should we engage with the supernatural elements of this text without just dismissing them as the tragic delusions of a starving man?
That is the necessary modern question, and there are two ways to answer it. First, we have to recognize the lens of early Christian cosmology.
How they saw the world.
Right. To Athanasius and Antony, the spiritual realm and the physical realm were not strictly separated by a concrete wall, the way our post-Enlightenment minds view them.
There wasn't a hard boundary.
They were completely intertwined. Spiritual reality is often manifested physically.
So they wouldn't even make the distinction we were trying to make between mental and physical.
No, they wouldn't. It was all part of the same reality. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly for a modern reader seeking spiritual truth, whether you interpret these beasts as literal, physical, demonic manifestations, or as deeply psychological hallucinations brought on by extreme sensory deprivation and asceticism, the reality of the inner warfare remains exactly the same.
The internal reality of the struggle doesn't change regardless of the mechanism.
Precisely. Think about what these beasts represent. They represent the chaotic, animalistic, violent passions that try to tear the human psyche apart when it attempts to remain perfectly still.
Just the noise of the self.
Yes. Anyone who has ever tried to sit in silent meditation for even 20 minutes knows this phenomenon.
Yeah.
You sit in silence, and your mind almost immediately starts screaming at you.
You remember things you didn't want to remember.
Repressed memories, sudden anxieties, irrational fears, bizarre urges, they rise up out of the subconscious like wild animals demanding your attention.
They want to force you to move, to break the silence.
Yes. Antony was experiencing that universal human phenomenon on a monumental, terrifying scale. The mechanism producing the beasts, whether it was external spiritual entities or the deepest, darkest recesses of his own subconscious mind reacting to the trauma of isolation, almost doesn't matter for the purpose of the manual.
It's the same battle either way.
The spiritual victory is found in his steadfast refusal to let the beasts move him from his physical and spiritual center. He held his ground.
So having survived the brutal trial of the tombs and having conquered the beasts both within and without, Antony realizes he is ready for total, absolute isolation.
The next level.
He crosses the river to what the text refers to as the outer mountain at Pisbear. He finds an abandoned, ruined fort that is completely infested with reptiles.
Because of course it is.
Yeah, naturally. He drives the reptiles out, moves in, and he barricades the door. And he stays inside for 20 solid years.
2 decades of complete, unbroken withdrawal. This marks the stage of ultimate purification.
He never comes out.
Never. He sees absolutely no one. People bring him bread, which they toss over the wall just twice a year.
Twice a year?
Yes. The pilgrims and curious visitors who come to stand outside the ruined fort report hearing what sounds like riotous demonic noises inside, shrieking, wailing, sounds of combat.
The war is still going on in there.
But Antony remains entirely hidden from human eyes.
Which sets up what is arguably the most dramatic and revealing moment in the entire text. After 20 years, his friends decide they have had enough.
They force the issue.
They literally take axes and crowbars and smash down the door of the fort. Now, if someone spent 20 years in solitary confinement in a ruined building today, we would know exactly what to expect.
You'd expect a tragedy.
We would expect to find an utterly broken human being. We would expect someone mentally shattered, unable to speak, physically emaciated, or perhaps completely feral.
A shell of a person.
But the door falls, Antony walks out, and Athanasius describes him as, well, completely unchanged.
This is perhaps the most profound theological moment in the entire biography.
It's miraculous.
He emerges into the light, and he is not emaciated from decades of fasting. He is not obese from a lack of movement. He is not mad from the crushing isolation.
He's just fine.
More than fine. He is in perfect, radiant, physical and spiritual equilibrium. Athanasius uses a very specific, deliberate phrase here. He says Antony's soul was in its natural state, created fair and perfectly straight.
We have to unpack that phrase, the natural state. Because to a modern listener, sitting alone in a ruined, dusty fort for 20 years seems like the most unnatural thing a human being could possibly do.
I know, it sounds paradoxical. But this introduces two vital Eastern Christian concepts that are central to the text: theosis and apatheia.
Okay, let's break those down.
Theosis is the process of intimate union with God, of the human soul literally partaking in the divine nature through grace.
Becoming Christ-like.
Exactly. And apathy is often mistranslated or misunderstood as apathy, but it has nothing to do with not caring.
It's not about being numb.
No, it means holy detachment.
Yeah.
It's a state of profound, unshakable inner tranquility where the passions, anger, lust, greed, pride no longer have any control over you.
You still have feelings, though.
You experience emotions, but you're not enslaved by them.
So when Athanasius says his soul was in its natural state, he is making a massive claim about human nature itself.
Yes. Athanasius is arguing that our current state, driven by endless desires, easily angered, constantly anxious, obsessed with status, is actually unnatural.
That's the glitch.
It is a tragic distortion of what we were meant to be. True asceticism, the grueling work Antony did in that fort, does not destroy the human being.
It fixes it.
It restores the human being to its original Edenic perfection. Before the fall, he is returning to the baseline of what it means to be truly human.
That is a staggering concept. He is like a piece of raw iron that has been left in a blazing fire for 20 years.
That's a great image.
He doesn't burn away to ash. He takes on the properties of the fire itself. He becomes light and heat. And Athanasius describes him emerging from the fort like a physician given by God to the land of Egypt.
He's ready to serve.
He doesn't come out hating humanity after being away from them for so long. He is filled with immense divine love. He immediately starts healing the sick, comforting the sorrowful, and reconciling enemies who have been fighting for years.
His withdrawal was never fueled by misanthropy or a hatred of the world.
He didn't just hate people.
No, he left the world to fight the demonic forces that secretly plague the world, and he returns to the world possessing the divine power to heal it.
Because he's clean inside.
Because he has utterly conquered his own ego, his own selfish desires, he can now truly serve others without his own needs getting in the way. He is a pure vessel.
And because of this profound mastery, thousands of people begin to flock to the desert just to be near him.
He becomes a celebrity, ironic.
Right. Monasteries begin to spring up like tents in the hills. He inadvertently becomes the spiritual father to this massive, unprecedented movement.
The Desert Fathers.
And to guide these new monks, he delivers a long, detailed discourse on exactly how to fight the unseen entities he has spent decades studying. It is essentially a masterclass in spiritual warfare.
It is known as the Discourse on Demons, and it is a masterpiece of early Christian spiritual psychology.
What's the main takeaway from it?
Antony's primary goal in this sermon is to completely demystify the demonic. He teaches his monks that demons are not dark gods.
They aren't equal to God.
Right. They are not the equals and opposites of God in some cosmic dualism. They are merely fallen, created beings. And fundamentally, because they are fallen, they have no actual binding power over a baptized Christian.
He aggressively strips them of their terrifying mystique.
He pulls back the curtain.
He tells the monks that demons rely almost entirely on phantoms, loud noises, and empty threats. They might pretend to be a horde of armed soldiers, or they might generate the terrifying sounds of clashing weapons and roaring beasts, but it is all theater.
It's smoke and mirrors.
It is a cosmic bluff.
If we look closely at the underlying mechanics here, Antony is unpacking the profound reality that evil operates primarily through illusion and fear.
Not actual power.
Exactly. He points out the obvious, undeniable logic of the situation. If the devil actually had the real power to kill you, he wouldn't need to make loud noises or pretend to be a terrifying monster to scare you.
He would just do it.
He would just kill you and be done with it.
So theatrics are proof of his weakness.
Exactly. The fact that the demons resort to smoke, mirrors, and psychological manipulation is definitive proof of their fundamental impotence.
The fear, the only weapon they have.
The fear itself is the trap. If you do not consent to the fear, if you refuse to believe the illusion, they can do absolutely nothing to you.
And he gives this wild, highly specific example to prove his point. He says the demons will sometimes pretend to prophesy the future.
This part is fascinating.
Because they are spiritual beings, they might travel quickly and accurately predict that the Nile River is going to flood in a few days, or that a specific visitor is currently walking down the road toward the monastery.
To show off?
Yeah, they do this to inspire awe, to make the monks think they are omniscient gods. But Antony tells the monks, who cares? Do not listen to them. Pay no attention.
He tells them their true defense is not in arguing with the demons or marveling at their tricks.
Don't even engage.
Right. It's in maintaining a clear conscience, cultivating joy in the Lord, and simply making the sign of the cross, which immediately shatters the demonic illusions.
But let me ask you to dive deeper into this specific point because it feels a bit counterintuitive.
Okay, sure.
Antony says we shouldn't care about knowing the future, even if the demons are telling the absolute truth about the Nile flooding. Why is predicting the future considered spiritually useless or even actively dangerous in this ascetical framework?
It seems like useful info.
Exactly. I mean, practically speaking, who wouldn't want a heads up if the river is going to flood their crops?
This is one of the most profound spiritual insights in the text. Antony recognizes that the human desire to seek hidden knowledge about the future is almost always rooted in vanity.
Vanity and fear, right?
Yes, a desperate, fearful grasp for control. Virtue, he argues, is about keeping the commandments today.
Right now.
It is about how you love your neighbor right now.
Mhm.
Fixation on what happens tomorrow distracts you from present repentance and present love.
Because if your mind is in tomorrow, you aren't actually present for today's battle.
Yes. Furthermore, true faith requires a radical surrender to the providence of God. If you are constantly trying to know the future, you aren't actually trusting God to provide for you.
You're trying to manage him.
You are trying to build your own security system rather than resting in his will. The demon offers future knowledge to pull the monk out of the present moment, which is the only place where God is actually encountered.
Oh, that hits incredibly hard when you apply it to our modern condition.
It really diagnoses our times.
If we relate this to the epidemic of modern anxiety, how much of our daily dread is actually just a phantom? It is a projection of future catastrophes, obsessing over the economy crashing next year, our health failing a decade from now, or political disaster on the horizon.
Things that haven't even happened.
Right. That phantom dread paralyzes our ability to act with love and courage in the present moment. Antony's advice is basically ignore the noisy phantoms of the future and focus entirely on the daily, rigorous discipline of today.
That is the exact application. The phantoms of modern anxiety steal our agency. They drain our spiritual energy.
We get exhausted by the future.
Antony demands that we stay fiercely rooted in the present moment, because the present is the only place where we can actually exercise our free will and choose virtue.
So Antony becomes incredibly famous. The desert is populated with thousands of monks seeking his guidance. But as his fame grows, the crowds become overwhelming.
He can't get any peace.
People are constantly seeking him out for miracles, for advice, to settle disputes. And Antony realizes that this fame, even though he is doing good works, is a subtle threat to his humility and his inner peace.
The world caught up to him.
The noise of the world has followed him into the desert. So what does he do? He retreats even further.
He realizes he must go deeper into the wilderness. He travels with a group of nomadic Saracens for several days into the deep, trackless desert until he finds a small oasis at the foot of a high mountain.
The inner mountain.
This location becomes known as the Inner Mountain. It is an even more radical withdrawal, a necessary step to maintain his spiritual edge and his constant communion with God.
And because he is so far out, he doesn't want to be a burden to the people who would occasionally make the long trek to bring him bread.
He wants to be self-sufficient.
So he starts a small garden, he cultivates some wheat and vegetables, but the wild animals in the desert, drawn to the water and the crops, start coming into his garden and damaging his food supply.
Now, notice how he handles this conflict.
He doesn't build a fence.
No. A worldly man would build a fortress, lay traps, or kill the animals to protect his property. The text says Antony simply goes out, gently catches one of the animals, holds it, and says to all of them, "Why do you do harm to me when I harm none of you? Go away, and in the Lord's name do not come near these things again."
And they actually listen.
And the animals actually obey him. They leave the garden alone.
It is a deliberate echo of the Garden of Eden, because Antony has definitively conquered the beasts within his own soul. The violent passions, the anger, the greed, the physical beasts of the desert intuitively submit to him.
He's back in harmony.
He has restored that original harmonious hierarchy between humanity and nature that existed before the fall.
It is the manifestation of his apatheia. Nature recognizes a pure soul.
Wow.
But even in this exalted state, he does not rest on his laurels. He introduces a vital practice for the monks who occasionally visit him, and this is where we see the intense concept of daily martyrdom and extreme vigilance.
The daily work never stops.
He teaches them that the ascetic life is never finished. You can never let your guard down. He tells them to keep a daily accounting of their innermost actions and thoughts.
He establishes the ledger of the soul.
Yes, a written record.
He gives them a specific instruction. Write down your sins and your darkest, most hidden thoughts as if you were going to read them aloud to another person.
What Athanasius is describing here is a brilliantly early, profound form of cognitive behavioral therapy seamlessly merged with spiritual confession.
It's so practical.
Antony is utilizing the natural human emotion of shame, but he is using it constructively. By forcing yourself to clearly articulate and write down a dark or sinful impulse before it manifests into a physical action, you expose it.
You pull it out of the shadows?
You use the anticipated shame of exposure to prevent the actual conception of sin.
It is a brutally honest spiritual audit. Think about how jarring that is compared to our world today.
It's the exact opposite of what we do.
We curate our public images so meticulously. On social media, we only write down and publish our absolute best moments, our cleverest thoughts, our most flattering angles.
We filter everything.
We are constantly writing, editing, and projecting a fictionalized, idealized version of ourselves. Antony says, no, do the exact opposite. Keep a private, unsparing ledger of your absolute worst, darkest impulses.
Expose your own darkness to yourself.
It is the ultimate antidote to vanity because it forces you to confront the stark reality of who you are when no one else is looking.
It completely shatters the false self. You cannot maintain a posture of vanity or superiority if you are painfully, daily aware of your own hidden brokenness.
And putting it on paper makes it real.
The act of writing it down is crucial because it externalizes the thought. It is no longer a vague, overwhelming feeling floating in your head. It is objective data on a page that you can observe, judge, and reject.
So Antony is living this life of extreme purity and constant vigilance at the inner mountain. And this purity grants him incredible spiritual authority, not just over nature and demons, but over the most educated, sophisticated minds of his era.
Yes, Athanasius includes a brilliant section toward the end of the text where highly educated Greek Neoplatonist philosophers travel out into the deep desert.
They want to see what all the fuss is about.
And they seek out Antony specifically to mock him. They view him as an unlettered, uneducated Egyptian rustic who believes in a foolish religion.
And Antony completely turns the tables on them, using their own philosophical logic to dismantle their arrogance.
He outsmarts the philosophers.
He asks them a deceptively simple question. Which comes first, the mind or the letters? Does the mind make letters, or do letters make the mind?
The philosophers, trapped by the logic, have to admit that the mind is the original source, and letters are merely the subsequent invention of the mind to communicate.
And Antony delivers the knockout blow.
Therefore, he whose mind is sound has no need of letters. He argues that a purified mind has direct, unmediated access to truth and does not need the crutch of complex, convoluted philosophy to know God.
He famously tells them, my book is the nature of created things, and thus I can read God's language at will.
He doesn't need a library.
He doesn't need their massive libraries or their intricate syllogisms, and he proves it right there in the desert. He doesn't try to demonstrate the truth of his faith by winning a rhetorical debate.
He shows them power.
He brings out people who are severely demon-possessed, and he cures them instantly right in front of the philosophers simply by invoking the name of Christ. He looks at the Greeks and says, you have words, but we have the power of the cross.
This exchange highlights the ascetical view of epistemology, which is the philosophy of how we know what we know.
Right, how do we arrive at truth?
For the Greek philosophers, and frankly for much of the modern world, truth is viewed as an equation you solve by accumulating enough data, reading enough books, and stacking up clever arguments.
Just consuming more information.
Exactly. But for Antony, truth isn't an argument or a concept. Truth is a person. It is Christ, and he is encountered directly through the agonizing daily work of purifying the heart.
It functions as a massive, devastating critique of our modern over-intellectualization. We operate on the default assumption that if we just read enough articles, watch enough documentaries, or, and I fully note the irony here, listen to enough deep dive audio summaries, we will somehow magically become wise.
We mistake data for wisdom.
We constantly equate the consumption of information with actual transformation.
Information is entirely passive. Wisdom, according to the Desert Fathers, requires action. It requires the grueling daily work of self-emptying and taking up the cross.
You have to actually do it.
You can read 1,000 books on the theology of detachment, but until you actually give away something you deeply love, you know absolutely nothing about it. The philosophers possessed the vast vocabulary of virtue. Antony possessed the living reality of it.
When we step back and synthesize the arc of this incredible life, the transformation is awe-inspiring. We started with a wealthy, comfortable youth, tethered to a massive estate.
The young lord.
We saw him boldly sever those ties, only to become a bruised, bleeding fighter in the dark tombs, battling the deepest psychological and spiritual terrors humanity can face.
Surviving the beasts.
We watched him emerge from decades of absolute isolation as the serene, perfectly balanced father of the desert, and we saw him stand as the unyielding defender of the faith, staring down demonic illusions, commanding wild beasts, and silencing arrogant philosophers.
And the most remarkable part is that he maintains this fierce discipline to the very end of his life.
He never retires.
He dies at the age of 105.
Mm.
And Athanasius makes a very specific point to note his physical condition at death.
How does he look after all that?
He writes that Antony's eyes were undimmed. He hadn't lost a single tooth, and his body was totally unimpaired, despite over 80 years of the most severe fasting, sleep deprivation, and physical hardship imaginable.
That's incredible.
His spiritual vitality preserved his physical form.
He even insists on a secret burial. He orders his 2 closest disciples to bury his body in an unmarked grave in the deep desert.
Because of the cultural customs.
Right. He knows the Egyptians had a custom of embalming and venerating the bodies of holy men, keeping them in their houses on couches. Antony hated that practice.
He didn't want to be a relic.
Even in death, he absolutely refused to let his body become a physical attachment, a distraction, or an idol for other people. He insisted on remaining hidden.
And this ultimately brings the entire text back to you, the listener. The enduring genius of Athanasius's work is that it isn't just a biography of a remarkable man who lived in the 3rd century.
It's a mirror.
It is designed to be a mirror for the soul. You may not be called to sell your house, abandon your career, and move into an abandoned, reptile-infested fort in the Egyptian desert.
Probably not.
But the concept of the desert itself is a universal spiritual necessity for every human being.
It is the place where you finally stop running.
Yes. The desert is the place where you are intentionally stripped of your coping mechanisms, your comfortable routines, and your carefully constructed illusions.
Where you face yourself.
It is the place where you must finally face the stark reality of your own soul, the beasts of your own untamed passions, and ultimately the terrifying and beautiful presence of the divine.
You can't avoid it out there.
Without some form of the desert in our daily lives, whether it is strict fasting, dedicated silence, or rigorous prayer, we remain spiritually asleep, dreaming that we are awake.
Which leaves us with the final provocative thought to carry with you. We live in a world that is brilliantly, aggressively engineered to keep you comfortable, endlessly entertained, and constantly stimulated.
Everything is a distraction.
Every app, every screen, every modern convenience is designed to prevent you from ever having to experience silence or true solitude. So, what is the desert in your own life that you are currently most afraid to enter?
Is it an hour of complete, unbroken silence without your phone or any background noise?
Is it facing the reality of a broken relationship without the buffer of constant busyness?
Or is it finally sitting down to write the honest ledger of your own soul?
And what phantoms, what illusions of fear, anxiety, or pride are currently standing guard at the edge of that desert, making loud, terrifying noises, hoping you will get scared and turn back to your comforts?
The algorithm of fear.
They are hoping you will never push through the fear to discover the absolute stillness, the perfect equilibrium, and the profound presence of God that is waiting for you on the other side of the noise.
You just have to cross the threshold.
The text tells us that if you just step into that arena, if you face the darkness and refuse to surrender your ground, the phantoms eventually vanish. It's dark and it's quiet, and at first, the loudest thing you hear is the chaos of your own mind. But if you wait and if you fight, well, if you fight, the light breaks through.